So I'd ask the open source panelists to turn on their cameras and turn on their audio as well. So this discussion is to me is fascinating. We look back to December of last year when the Apache Log4j vulnerabilities were first disclosed. And, since then, we've seen tens of thousands of Java packages that have been impacted by this. And it shows and reveals for us, that the long tentacles that that the software ecosystem and that open source has potentially for each of our organizations. So I thought as a starting point, Kevin, I'd like to introduce you first. If you could tell us a little bit about your role at Boston College and what you've been seeing with respect to these vulnerabilities and what's happening in the market since then.
Sure. Thanks, Tom, and hi, everyone. I'm Kevin Powers. I'm the founder and director of the Masters of Science in Cybersecurity Policy and Governance here at Boston College. I'm a professor of the practice over at Boston College Law School. I say over because that's across the way. I'm here on campus now. And also over the Carroll School of Management, which is outside my window here. I'm also a research affiliate and faculty over at MIT Sloan, where I teach a course in cybersecurity for boards of directors focused on governance. So that's me. And your question on what I'm seeing on vulnerabilities, I'm not a techie, I'm a lawyer. So when I look at this, it's really, the big issues that are popping up on our end are really vulnerability management. How are companies or how organizations, government or otherwise, how are they putting programs together and how are they addressing this and working it the way they need to, specifically strategically? What you see is a lot of policies in place. Folks try to follow those policies. But as we know, cybersecurity is all about risk and it's about risk management. And it really comes down to what the regulators and plaintiffs' counsels are focusing on, heaven forbid there's a data breach or anything along those lines. They're going to look and say, hey, you have these policies in place. You have a critical or a non-critical. You need to address that within 30 days, 60 days, 90 days. Looks here that you focused on these 10 things, which could be highly critical. And you need to justify when you did that. So it's always key for anyone, from what I'm seeing anyways, is if you have policies in place, follow them. But if you make a risk, a decision, a critical decision, document it. So back up everything you do on that end.
Great advice. Thanks. Kevin, we'll come back to you shortly. I'd like to invite Rocco to the stage. Rocco, great to see you again.
Likewise, thanks, Tom. And I saw our fellow industry colleague, Arvin, join us. We'll get to, thanks for making the time, Arvin. Hi, everyone. Rocco Grillo, Managing Director, Alvarez and Marsal, overseer global cyber risk incident response investigations. Nice to see everyone again. And thanks again to the HMG organization having me involved with yet another event. This topic, who's not touching it? Who's not hearing about it? Who hasn't responded to or had to react to Log4j earlier this year? And at the same time, as much as Log4j got everyone's attention, wasn't the first, wasn't the last. And love the opportunity to do it, be in a session like this with both Kevin and Arvin. But Kevin, your background on the legal side really drives the point home. All too often when you're dealing with open source code, secure code, vulnerabilities, you're always looking at your software developers, you're looking at IT and security operations, and hopefully you're not in the boat, but many companies, when one of those exposures are exploited, you're dealing with an incident response team. But where this really has evolved as well, to having professionals like Kevin involved, not to say you're not involved with the IT and open source development, code development, but the regulatory landscape really, shattered the industry as to companies responding not just, from secure code standpoint, but a lot of the exposures, business disruption, the legal entities, your brand, your reputation, right, impact. I think in the blink of an eye, many companies went from a consumer of software products and the use of open source to now who wasn't affected by Log4j, major corporations I'm talking about. And at the same time, we are all in one capacity or another a software provider. We'll drive a little deeper onto that, Tom, but I want to give you the opportunity to get Arvin into discussion.
Oh, that's great. Thanks for that, Rocco. Appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Arvin, thanks for joining us. Welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me, Tom. Great to be part of this panel. Arvin Bansal, I work for AmerisourceBergen. We are a Fortune 10 firm. We are one of the top 3 pharma distributor, and 96% of the US hospitals are our customers. So when the COVID hit, we were right at the forefront of it. And earlier in 2022, when Log4j hit, that's not another challenge that anyone would want to have on top of what we were dealing with. But yet again, we were there. And many a times, I ask myself, is this a new problem? And the answer is no. Have we seen that before? Yes, 2014, Heartbleed. It like rocked the entire world, and you would see in televisions, those big heart shapes and bleeding and all of those pieces. So very excited to be part of this discussion. Looking forward to share more thoughts on this.
Thanks, Arvin. So, without going into details about how Log4j affected AmerisourceBergen, and given what you shared about, this isn't the first instance with an open source vulnerability. With what did happen with Log4j, what are some of the things that this led you to think about and led your organization to address even a little bit differently? Can you talk about that?
Yeah. Do you want me to go, Tom?
Yes, that was for you, Arvin.
Yes, absolutely. As Kevin mentioned on this earlier, I think there were a couple of realizations immediately. Many organizations, they believe they have a solid vulnerability management program. They believe they have a way to scan the entire network. They believe that they will be able to find these kind of things very quickly. But then the reality hits. And then all of a sudden you're scrambling. Hey, what are the signatures for this? Oh, there is no signature. Oh, what are the relevant files for this? Oh, these are the files in the folders, but the level is so deep, you may not be able to get to it. Then how do I find that out? Oh, we need some more time to get to the level of details. In the meantime, start with this, right? So it exposes some of the shortcomings that were not visible before in how we look at the environment, how we work towards identifying the exposure, let alone the remediation part. That's another challenge. If you found the line of codes, who does these line of codes belong to fix it? What services will go down? So there was a big learning on our part. There are improvements that can be made on how we manage our overall infrastructure, how we manage our software, and there were conversations starting about software bill of material pieces. That's one piece. On the cloud side, it was another eye-opener but it was much better than working on our own infrastructure, because we had partners looking into entire cloud system, because it was impacting the world, not just us. So rapidly, people were coming out with the solution. And cloud sort of helped us scan through environments, try to mitigate the risk much more faster than how we could handle it in the data center world.
Great points. Yeah, and it shows that that reliance and interdependency upon the third-party providers as well.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks for that, Arvin. We'll come back to you shortly. Kevin, I want to come back to a point that Rocco had raised earlier when he was talking about, how the security teams at organizations, they need to work more closely with, say, for example, with software developers. From your experiences and in talking with CISOs in the industry, do security teams or members of the team need to be part of that discussion with software developers as they interface with software providers as well?
Wow, Tom, you gave me an easy one. The answer is yes. And do you want me to follow up with the why?
That'd be great.
Yeah, that was a great one. No, Tom, yeah, I agree 100%. It really, looking at things now where we are, security has to be something security first, no matter what you're doing. You can't rely on the developers, they're great at what they do, but they're not thinking security, right? They're thinking efficiency, they're building out the code, and they're working with open source code. And when they're working with open source code, you don't know what's there. There's no warranties, there's no security involved in it. There might be some, but the key here, when you're working with all of this, is to make sure that the security teams involved, they're working hand on glove with the developers. And another key component of this, taking it in, I think it's important to have the business side of the house involved here too, so they know what's going on with the IT, working with the developers while they're building a program, okay, not just focused on security, but it's efficiencies to get their job done. So they understand that why security is involved. And then if there's funding needed, you make the business case that, hey, we're using this type of development, this software, we have to make sure it's secure, because if it's not, you might be able to do your job, but eventually the whole operation is going to go down because it's not secure.
Sure. Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Thanks. So Rocco, just to dig into this a little bit deeper, as you're working with clients on these issues, are you finding that they need to work or coordinate more closely, not only with IT and software development teams, but also say with legal, with procurement, other parts of the organization?
No doubt, Tom. It's a great question. That's why I even said at the beginning, typically working with CISOs and cybersecurity experts like Arvin, but to be able to do a session like this at the legal side, many times, the business isn't focused on it. As Kevin was saying, well, guess what? Log4j made everyone take focus real fast. Because again, I think there's a number of ways you can tackle this. You look within your four walls and the way that you're conducting business. You're taking open source, and again, critical to a number of organizations. But the one thing that companies need to understand is when you're using that as part of your service, and again, I don't mean as product or service. When you say it could be a bank, you can be a healthcare organization. When that becomes part of your fabric, even though it's open source, you're responsible for the quality and the security of that. And when you open it up to your clients, your customer base, whatever it may be, all of a sudden, it's not just about secure code, it's your brand, it's your reputation. And one piece we've talked about a lot over the past in HMG sessions, that third-party risk management side of things. I like to say you can outsource the function, but you know who owns the risk when that piece comes in. And it really grows into multiple tentacles, not just Log4j and potential open source and vulnerabilities you have in your four walls. But what really makes this complicated, not just Log4j, any open source solution, your third parties, you can do everything under the sun. And I know people like Arvin and our clients, we're all working 9 to 5, taking Fridays off in Log4. That's a bad joke, but say that in jest. But I think to that end, you can do all the patching, update those applications that don't have as much scrutiny as many of them do. But at the same time, the big challenge, the Achilles heel, are all those third parties. You can go out, and I'm sure Kevin, you and your colleagues in the legal profession, we're busy as much as you can have your IT security teams patching, looking what's in your four walls, but now you've got to pivot to those vendor agreements. And as much as you can attest to what's in your four walls, you're relying on those third parties. It's great that they signed the contract. How do they know? How do you know that every one of those vulnerabilities has been patched? So it continues to evolve along those lines. For clients, Tom, I mean, again, we help clients from an advisory standpoint, but 50% or more is on the response side. A number of companies, a lot of companies were conducting threat hunting. While you can apply those patches, you don't know what you don't know. And those are the pieces where companies are really scrambling around the clock to identify potential exposures or vulnerabilities that were exposed.
Thanks for that, Rocco. Great stuff. So Arvin, just to turn this discussion a little bit, as we talk about third parties, we talk a lot in the HMG community about the difference between partners and vendors. And, through your experiences, what have you found in terms of the type of support that your truly trusted partners have been able to deliver to you? Because we can't do everything. Our security teams can't do everything. So we have to rely on our partners to be able to help us out, correct? I think you're on mute, Arvin.
Thank you. And you're absolutely correct, Tom. And crisis is the best time to find who's your friend and who's not. So, so in our case, we received many text messages. Hey, sorry to hear about this. How can we help? No product, nothing. And there were many partners who were sending us intelligence, who were sending us some of the tips and what they found, etc. So it was really great to work with those partners. You build those relationships where they are selflessly coming forward to help, and they genuinely wanted to help. Then you have the other side of the partners where you have, big, huge vendors that are part of our ecosystem, from Seattle or Palo Altos of the world, etc. And they hold regular briefings with you that, hey, this is what we saw at other customers, this is what we are doing, and what's going on in that world. So you get a lot of intelligence, but the action part is a little bit slow in that front. And then you have some local partners. They really step up. They really step up and, hey, I'll be in the office, whatever you need. Hey, my resources are on the standby, whatever you need. Hey, this is what I saw in the Azure world. You may want to try this tweak. Let me send you this script. Let me send you this for this type of resources. So all in all, I would say a crisis was a great opportunity to see from the third party perspective who's working with us, who's moving fast, and of course there's a smaller subsection. Oh, I can solve your Log4j problem. Deploy it to me in 12 hours, and I'll find everything. No agent, nothing, right? So you get those calls too. So you just differentiate that part. So that's on the third party external side. Third party software itself, I think the industry, the way softwares have been developed, there is no structure to them per se. If you traditionally think how developers go about building the app, they have to solve a problem. And many of them go through internet and find different ways of solving problems of pre-written codes. And they sort of just get used in there. In one company, you may have 10 different software doing exactly the same library and the same things. That's the variability in the development world. So I think that's something from third-party software perspective that is going to be the problem for the foreseeable future. It's not going to get rid of itself, soon. There's one hope though. One hope from the government side. Now they're talking about creating SBOM. And I think that's a great first step to increase the awareness in the industry. And for us to talk to management, hey, even the government is asking us to do it, right? So it gives us that support. The second part that'll go is, when you do business with federal government, that becomes part of your, hey, we need to do SBOM. Let's start working towards it. It's complicated and all. And the third, if you look at the overall IT trend, where the IT is going, traditionally we are writing lots of codes in-house, but now we are doing a lot of new application on cloud, which will make it faster to detect, not eliminate, faster to detect these kind of issues. And then the encouraging part is the SaaS adoption. So now all of a sudden, for us consuming the services, that may not be a direct impact. And maybe the technology provider, who are the experts in the codes, might be able to find and address these things much, much faster before it becomes a world crisis.
Great stuff, Arvin. Thanks so much for sharing. So we're running a little bit over, so we're gonna wrap this up here. But I want to thank the three of you for joining us today and sharing your perspectives. This clearly is an issue that's not going away, but you've offered great advice for the people who are with us today. So thank you so much for your time.
Always a pleasure.
Thanks, Tom.
for having us, Tom.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.